I'm Christina, 25 years old, and I'm mostly to myself, even though I have a job or study. My family might think I don't because I don't talk about it much, especially my brother. How did I end up like this? Well, it all goes back to my time in middle school when I started feeling like I couldn't trust people. It's not just one thing that caused it, but mostly because I felt ignored. I guess people didn't find me interesting because I was always into machines. I've always enjoyed messing around with computers, and I was pretty good at it, which helped out at home. But then my school grades dropped because I spent more time with computers than with friends, and my parents got worried. When I finished elementary school, my parents started telling me off, saying, "Stop spending so much time with those machines." During middle school, as my parents kept scolding me, I started feeling like I shouldn't pursue my interests. So whenever I had free time from school, I'd hide in my room to avoid my parents, cutting off contact with the outside world. This made more people think I was strange or risky, and I started feeling isolated, even at school. The only person who supported me was my brother, Keith. He always knew how to cheer me up and keep me going. With his help, I finished school, but I didn't go to high school. Instead, I did computer jobs from home. When I was about 16, I got a part-time job, and with the money I earned, I bought old computers to take apart and rebuild from scratch, just the way I liked. My hobby became a business opportunity, and by the time I hit 20, I was making and selling computers. Soon, I started my own business offering affordable computers and became quite well known. By the time I turned 25, I'd made a decent amount of money. I even started contributing $2,500 to my parents' household each month and still had money left over. Even though I tried explaining my job to my parents, they didn't get it. After a few arguments, they decided that as long as I could support myself, they didn't mind what I did. This meant they stopped interfering and I could live as I pleased at home. But my brother still didn't think much of me. My brother used to be my ally, the one who understood me best. When I was in school, he was really kind. But maybe he got tired of his sister, who was still at her parents' house tinkering with machines, even after turning 20. Over time, he started treating me harshly whenever he saw me. Since I didn't keep quiet about it, we ended up having more conflicts, and now we're not on good terms. Things got even worse after my brother got married. His wife, who he'd known since high school, never really liked me. After hearing about me from my brother, she didn't want to be my sister-in-law and seemed to influence my brother against me. Because of this ongoing situation, I became known as the troublemaker at home. Even though I stayed in my room most of the time, I felt my heart breaking from all the hostility directed at me, which was different from my parents' concerned words. Suddenly, my parents' home, once a cozy sanctuary despite the criticisms, turned into a hostile environment. I no longer felt comfortable there, and it seemed like my parents were being swayed against me while my allies disappeared. Even though I had my own income and contributed to the household expenses, my brother and sister-in-law, who didn't understand my work, saw me as a burden. They started talking about kicking me out and taking over the house. Feeling disconnected from my brother and his plans, I figured leaving wouldn't make much of a difference. Once I found a new place, I wouldn't have to contribute to household expenses anymore, which meant I could save that money instead. It was kind of a silver lining. As I was thinking about moving out, my brother brought up the topic of inheritance out of the blue. He seemed to think that our parents' financial comfort, despite my lack of a traditional job, was due to their wealth. So when the idea of me leaving came up, he suggested, since we'll be taking care of Mom and Dad, we should inherit their assets. You should give up your share of the inheritance. But the truth was, the reason our parents could enjoy their lives without working was because I was covering their living expenses. I didn't think they could manage without that money, but my brother saw me as nothing but a burden. Despite feeling like leaving was the best option, I decided to ask one more time, out of kindness, "Are you really okay with me leaving?" I asked my brother. He just laughed and said, "We'd be happy if you left already." It became clear once again how little he understood. I felt sorry for him and his wife, which made me even more determined to leave. A few days later, I was still in my room, and my brother and sister-in-law were relentless in their efforts to get me out. They kept knocking on my door, convinced Mom to stop cooking for me, and even told me to do my own laundry. But these were all things I'd have to do if I lived alone anyway. I wasn't going to just sit back and let them take my place away from me without a fight. Sure, I wasn't happy about it, but I wasn't about to accept it either. I was being unfairly pushed out, and I wasn't going to take it lying down. After all, I was skilled with machines, something my brother seemed to forget. He didn't realize the power I had with a computer at my disposal. I wasn't the type to quietly obey orders and leave. My brother's marriage with me as the reclusive sister was the only chance for our parents to have a grandchild. They were so focused on that they didn't see how wrong it was for me to leave. So I decided to set up a little surprise for them, a trap that would spring into action as soon as I left the house. After finding a new place to live and completing all the necessary procedures, I was ready to leave my family home. Just before I departed, I left a farewell message for my parents and brother. "I've been supporting the family, and you've forgotten all the good I've done. I hope you realize who the real burden on our family wealth is." My parents seemed surprised for a moment, but they probably trusted that my brother would figure things out somehow. They all brushed off my words as bitterness. I knew they didn't take me seriously, but for now, I believed it was best to leave things this way. So I left the house. I took a significant amount of equipment from my family home and bought additional items, along with necessary furniture and appliances, for my new place. I set up my new place just the way I wanted it, decorating it with my favorite style and creating a cozy atmosphere. It turned out to be a perfect environment for me to work in, and surprisingly, living alone wasn't as intimidating as I thought it would be. In fact, I wished I had made the move sooner. The people in the neighborhood were friendly and life was comfortable. Since leaving my family home and taking care of everything on my own, I've been enjoying myself, trying out new experiences. While I was reveling in my newfound independence, I wondered how things were going back at my family home, especially since they lost my financial support. Then, out of the blue, my mother called. "Hey, Christina, did you do something to our machines?" she asked. "What do you mean?" I replied. "There's something wrong with the computers and electronics," she said. "I have no idea about that," I said, puzzled. "I used to help out for free because we're family, but since you treated me poorly and kicked me out, even though you're my parents, you'll have to pay the regular price," I explained. "What? That's pretty greedy. We're your parents. Can't you give us a discount?" they responded. "Well, I prefer giving discounts to my friends. Unlike you, they treat me well," I countered. "Fine, you're so cheap," they grumbled internally. I sighed with relief that another trap hadn't been triggered and dealt with the situation calmly. But my mother didn't seem to appreciate my response. She abruptly hung up, behaving like a sulking child, and even sent a spiteful email implying that people lose friends. It made me question who was acting like the mature one. Frankly, it seemed self-centered, if not downright selfish. As for what I did to the family computer, I simply restored all the adjustments I had previously made for free back to their original settings. To someone unfamiliar, it might seem like the computer malfunctioned on its own. When I suggested they contact the company for repairs as an individual, they got upset. But I expected as much, so I let it go. 6 months after leaving home and settling into my new life, my father called me. "I hate to ask, but can you lend me some money?" he said. "What do you mean, lend you money?" I responded. "Your brother and his wife have been spending recklessly. They think we're rich and they keep complaining, asking for money to buy this or go there," he explained. "I have no idea about any of this. Why you always come to me with everything? I've heard of daughters who live alone sending money home, but parents asking their children for money? Shouldn't it be the other way around out of generosity? I questioned. It's not that simple, he replied. Well, even $500 would help, he added. I'm not giving you anything. I won't lend you money either. I have no intention of financially supporting you anymore, I firmly stated. Of course, I'll work on your machines if you pay for my services, I replied calmly. You've really become stingy, they retorted. I guess Mom was right about you, they went on, complaining about my unemployed years. But I didn't let it bother me. I just ended the call. My father didn't send any emails, but he started calling me multiple times a day, which I found annoying. What troublesome parents I have, I thought to myself. A few days later, my brother, sounding desperate, called me. When I asked why they kept contacting me, he asked, "Do you know why our family was wealthy?" It seemed like he suspected their financial situation had worsened since I moved out, but it was too late. My current home was my sanctuary. My work and life were all centered around this house, and I had no intention of leaving it again. Could it be that our family's wealth came from the $2,500 I was contributing each month? I pondered. I didn't have to give that much, but I felt grateful for my upbringing, so I willingly contributed more. But now, why would I continue supporting a home that kicked me out? It didn't make sense, right? So that's when Mom and Dad's finances took a hit, my brother realized. I'm sorry, but even if you asked me to come back, I have no intention of doing so, I replied firmly. I understand now that what happened was wrong. I'm sorry, but it's too late for apologies. I have no plans to have any involvement with you in the future. Please don't call me anymore, I said. Hey, wait, my brother protested, but I ended the call. When I left home, I made a vow never to be drawn back into their drama. Forgiving them wasn't something I could do easily. I decided to cancel my cell phone contract to avoid the constant calls. 5 years have passed since then, and I've moved on. I got married and started a new chapter in my life. My partner is in the same line of work as me, so he understands my lifestyle and helps out with household chores. Although I thought about reaching out to my parents since they're family, I felt it was too late. I hadn't made any attempts to reconnect. However, my husband expressed an interest in meeting my parents and learning about their current situation to gain insight. I hired a detective to investigate. What we discovered was shocking. My parents, desperate to maintain their lifestyle and keep my brother and his wife tied to the family home, had accrued a mountain of debt from various lenders with no hope of repayment. The debt continued to grow with accumulating interest, leaving them in a dire situation. The debt for my parents alone exceeded $100,000, and their house had been used as collateral. Now, where our family home once stood, there is only an empty lot. Although I felt a twinge of sadness due to my sentimental attachment to our family home, I realized that moving on was the best decision for me. I couldn't help but think that my parents were facing the consequences of their actions. I decided to look into my brother's current situation. It appeared that my brother had suggested a divorce due to his wife's extravagant spending habits, but she vehemently opposed the idea. They were now embroiled in a drawn-out divorce lawsuit, which was draining both their time and finances. His wife had hired a lawyer and was resisting the divorce, refusing to let go of my brother, leaving them at an impasse. Despite rumors, my brother and his wife hadn't yet had children. To confirm, I sent the detective to the hospital where they were being treated. It turned out my brother was indeed infertile, nearly incapable of producing sperm, making natural conception highly unlikely. My parents, who had pinned their hopes on having grandchildren from my brother and his wife, were disappointed and ended their cohabitation. The family home had to be sold to settle the debt, marking the sad state of my family. This distressing reality became apparent after a cursory investigation. It was evident that engaging with them in this condition wouldn't be beneficial for me or my husband. Now I have a loving husband, 4 children, and a dog. We've purchased a spacious home and are living the life my family once dreamed of. If they were aware of our situation, they might try to exploit it, which I couldn't bear. As soon as I learned about this, I went to the local office and arranged for my personal information to be accessible only through formal disclosure requests. I made a conscious effort to keep my distance from them and asked my husband not to engage with them regarding our marriage. Although he seemed disappointed at first, after explaining the situation, he understood and hasn't brought it up since. I hope that once things settle down at my family home and a time for reconciliation arrives, I can rebuild a relationship with my parents and brother.
Keep the house. I'm done with this marriage. No papers mean no splitting assets. Marcus's message flashed on my phone screen as I stood in our home office, sorting through old boxes of his grandfather's paperwork. I didn't cry or shake. Instead, I felt strangely calm. My name is Diana. I'm 34 years old, and today I found out my husband of 8 years is leaving me for his 25-year-old yoga instructor, Ashley. The worst part? I was the one who signed him up for those yoga classes to help his back pain. I looked around the office, Marcus's grandfather's mahogany desk, the wall of family photos, and the filing cabinets filled with memories. Marcus thought he could just walk away because we never officially registered our marriage. Our wedding had been beautiful, a sunset ceremony in Hawaii with family and friends. Marcus had convinced me we didn't need legal paperwork. It's just government nonsense, he'd said. We know we're married. Young and in love, I believed him. Now I knew why he had insisted. My phone buzzed again. Ashley and I are coming tomorrow to pick up my things. Don't make this difficult. I ignored it and kept sorting through the boxes. Marcus's grandfather, Harold, had passed away recently, and as usual, I was left to handle everything. Harold had always liked me, often inviting me over for tea and telling me, "You've got a good head on your shoulders." Then I found it, a dusty old leather folder. Something about it caught my attention. When I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. A marriage certificate, our marriage certificate. Marcus and I were legally married after all. The paperwork was official, signed, and dated 8 years ago. Suddenly, I remembered something Harold had told me before the wedding. Let an old man handle the paperwork. Consider it my gift. At the time, I thought he was just helping. But now I saw the truth. He had been protecting me. My phone buzzed again. Don't get any ideas about claiming anything. We both know there's no legal binding between us. I took a picture of the certificate and sent it to my best friend Julia, who was a lawyer. Minutes later, my phone rang. "Diana, this changes everything," Julia said excitedly. "Marcus can't just leave. He legally has to split assets with you." I thought about our house, the vacation property, and all the investments Marcus had put under his name. He thought he could take everything and walk away. He was wrong. "What should I do?" I asked. "Don't tell him yet," Julia advised. "Let me check the legal details first. Then we make our move." The next morning, Marcus walked in with Ashley, both in matching yoga outfits. "Diana, I hope you packed my things." "Let's not make this ugly," he said smugly. I sat at the kitchen counter, calmly sipping my coffee. "Actually, Marcus, we need to talk about the divorce." He laughed. "Divorce? There's nothing to divorce. We never filed the paperwork, remember?" I smiled. "Are you sure about that?" Marcus hesitated. Ashley shifted uncomfortably beside him. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. I took another sip of coffee. "You might want to check with a lawyer before touching anything. It would be a shame to make a mistake." His face turned red. "Are you threatening me?" "Not at all," I said. "Just giving you some advice. Your grandfather taught me to always know the facts before making decisions." At the mention of Harold, Marcus's confidence wavered. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Take your time," I said, standing up. "Talk to a lawyer. I'll be here when you're ready to divide our assets fairly." As I walked away, I heard Marcus whispering angrily to Ashley. I smiled to myself. My phone buzzed. A message from Julia. "Got everything we need. Ready to proceed whenever you are." I looked at Harold's photo on the wall and whispered, "Thank you." Marcus had no idea what was coming, but he was about to learn that karma and his grandfather always had the final say. The next few days brought a storm I'd been anticipating. Marcus's lawyer called mine, then called again, his tone shifting from dismissive to concerned to downright panicked. The marriage certificate wasn't just valid, it was ironclad. Harold hadn't just filed the paperwork, he'd made sure every detail was perfectly documented. I sat in Julia's office, watching her handle a call from Marcus's latest attorney. She put it on speaker so I could hear. "My client is willing to offer a settlement," the attorney said, his voice tight. "He's prepared to be generous." Julia smiled, catching my eye. "Generous? You mean he's willing to split their marital assets fairly as required by law?" "Now, let's be reasonable," the attorney countered. "Mr. Mitchell had these assets before their arrangement. Their marriage," Julia corrected firmly. "And no, most of these assets were acquired during their 8-year marriage. I have documentation showing Mrs. Mitchell's substantial contributions to their acquisition." I thought about all the years I'd supported Marcus's career, managing our household while he climbed the corporate ladder. The houses we bought and renovated together, the investments we discussed over countless dinner tables. He'd always insisted on keeping everything in his name, for tax purposes, he claimed. The attorney cleared his throat. "My client feels betrayed. He had no knowledge of this marriage certificate." "Betrayed?" Julia's voice was sharp. "Your client participated in a legal marriage ceremony. The fact that he assumed no paperwork was filed doesn't negate his responsibilities. Would you like me to share the video of him exchanging vows?" After the call ended, Julia turned to me. "He's panicking. The prenup he thought he'd avoided by not filing paperwork? That works in your favor now. Without it, you're entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage." I nodded, feeling a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Harold knew, didn't he? He knew Marcus would try something like this eventually. Harold Mitchell was a smart man, Julia agreed. The notes we found with the marriage certificate prove he submitted everything properly. He even paid the filing fees himself. That evening, I returned home to find Marcus sitting on our front steps, alone. "Where's Ashley?" I asked, stepping past him to unlock the door. "She's taking some time to think," he muttered. "Diana, we need to talk." I left the door open but didn't invite him in. "Now you want to talk? Not when you were texting me about taking everything." He followed me into the kitchen, running his hands through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. "You don't understand. Ashley and I. It's real. This isn't just some fling." "No," I said, turning to face him. "You don't understand. This isn't about Ashley. This is about you thinking you could discard 8 years of marriage without consequences." "I never meant to." "To what? To hurt me? To steal everything we built together? To use a technicality to leave me with nothing?" His face reddened. "Grandpa had no right to file those papers without telling me." "He had every right," I countered. "He was protecting both of us. He knew what marriage meant. Real marriage, not just playing house until something younger came along." Marcus slumped against the counter. "Ashley left," he admitted. "When she found out about the legal issues, about having to wait for a divorce, she said she didn't sign up for this drama." I couldn't help but laugh. "No, she signed up for a man she thought was free and clear. Funny how quickly people run when they realize actions have consequences." "What do you want?" he asked, his voice tired. "What I've always wanted. Fairness. We built this life together, Marcus. I won't let you pretend those 8 years meant nothing." He looked around the kitchen we'd remodeled together, at the photos on the walls, the life we'd built. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd married. "Grandpa left me a letter," he said quietly. "In his desk. I found it yesterday." He pulled an envelope from his pocket, hands shaking slightly. "He wrote it right after our wedding. Said he filed the papers because he saw how much you loved me, how good you were for me. He wanted to make sure I couldn't ruin it with my fear of commitment." I felt tears prick at my eyes but kept my voice steady. He was a wise man. "I was so angry when I found out about the certificate," Marcus continued. "But reading his letter, he knew me better than I knew myself. He saw what I might do, what I did do." "It doesn't change anything," I said firmly. "You still chose to leave, to try to take everything." He nodded, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. "I know, I thought you should know that Grandpa did it because he loved us both. He wanted me to be better than this. I watched as he walked toward the door, shoulders slumped. At the threshold, he turned back. I'll have my lawyer contact Julia about a fair settlement. No more games. After you left, I sat in Harold's old chair, now placed in my home office. The leather was worn soft with age, carrying the wisdom of years. I pulled out the letter Harold had left for me, found tucked inside the folder with the marriage certificate. Dear Diana, it read, if you're reading this, it means you found the certificate and likely means you need it. I've watched you love my grandson with a patience and grace he doesn't yet deserve. I hope he grows into the man worthy of that love. But if he doesn't, know that I've made sure you're protected. Not just because it's right, but because you're the daughter I never had. Never let anyone convince you that you deserve less than everything you've worked for. I folded the letter carefully, placing it back in its envelope. Tomorrow would bring more negotiations, more legal discussions about dividing assets. But tonight, I felt at peace, protected by the foresight of a man who'd seen clearly what his grandson could not. 6 months after finding Harold's hidden marriage certificate, I stood in the freshly renovated kitchen of my new home. The morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating the space I'd designed exactly as I wanted. Half of the proceeds from selling our old house had given me the freedom to start fresh. Julia sat at my kitchen island, reviewing the final divorce settlement over coffee. Everything's signed, she said, closing the folder with satisfaction. The assets have been divided fairly, just as Harold would have wanted. I smiled, thinking of the old man's photograph that now sat on my mantel. He changed everything, didn't he? Not just with the certificate, but with his letters, too. The impact of Harold's letters had rippled beyond just Marcus and me. After our story got out, 3 other women in our social circle discovered their partners had used the same no papers tactic. Harold's foresight had inadvertently helped them too, setting a precedent for challenging these unofficial arrangements. Have you heard from Marcus? Julia asked, stirring her coffee. Ashley left him for her surf instructor in Bali, I said, unable to suppress a small smile. He's been sending me texts about regret and second chances. And I'm not interested in second chances with someone who only wanted me when he had nothing better lined up. I walked to the window, looking out at my new garden. Besides, I'm too busy living my best life. It was true, the divorce settlement had given me more than just financial security. It had given me freedom. Freedom to travel, to pursue my interests, to build something that was completely mine. Last week, I'd received an unexpected package from Harold's old law firm. Inside was another letter, this one dated just weeks before his death. Dear Diana, it read, I hope you never need the protection I put in place. But if you do, know that it comes with my blessing to build the life that makes you proud. You taught Marcus about love, even if he wasn't ready to learn. Now it's time to show the world what you can do when you're standing on your own. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Harold's sister, Margaret, carrying a large box. Found these while cleaning out my attic, she said, setting the box down. Thought you should have them. Inside were photo albums and documents from Harold's early life. Pictures of him as a young lawyer, fighting for civil rights in the 60s. News clippings about cases he'd won for underdogs. Letters from grateful clients. He always fought for what was right, Margaret said, her eyes misty. Even when it wasn't popular, when he told me he'd filed your marriage certificate himself, I wasn't surprised. That was Harold, quietly making sure justice would prevail. We spent the afternoon going through the box, Margaret sharing stories about her brother's life. You know, she said, he talked about you all the time. Said you reminded him of himself. Someone who saw the best in people but wasn't afraid to stand up when it mattered. That evening after Margaret left, I added some of Harold's photos to my wall. They fit perfectly alongside my new life. A reminder that sometimes the people who impact us most profoundly are the ones who prepare us for battles we don't even know are coming. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. I miss our life together. I was a fool. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop to finish the book I'd been writing. A guide for women about protecting themselves legally in relationships. Harold's story was the opening chapter. A week later, I hosted a housewarming party. Friends filled my new home with laughter and warmth. Julia raised her glass for a toast. To Diana, who showed us all that karma has perfect timing. And to Harold Mitchell, who proved that sometimes our greatest allies are watching out for us even when we don't know we need them. As my guests mingled, I slipped away to my study for a quiet moment. Harold's photo seemed to twinkle at me from the wall. I touched the frame gently, thinking of all he'd set in motion with one simple act of love and foresight. "Thank you," I whispered to his image, "not just for the certificate, but for showing me that true family protects each other, even across time." My new life wasn't what I'd planned when I said my vows 8 years ago on that beach in Hawaii. It was better. It was authentic, built on a foundation of self-respect and gratitude for those who help us find our strength. Harold's last letter sat framed on my desk, its final lines visible in the setting sun. "Remember, dear Diana, sometimes the best legacy we can leave is ensuring that justice finds its way to those who deserve it most. You deserved every protection I could offer, and you deserve every joy that comes your way now." I was finally ready to embrace all that joy and all the adventures yet to come. "Get out. This is my son's house," Margaret shouted, her face red with anger as 2 locksmiths changed the front door locks. I stood in the driveway, dirt on my knees from gardening, too shocked to speak. My mother-in-law had always disliked me, but this was a new low. She had waited until my husband James was deployed overseas to lock me out. "You have 1 hour to pack," she said coldly, tapping her fancy watch. "Anything left behind belongs to my son." I'm Alex, 32 years old, and I never thought I'd be thrown out of my own home by my husband's mother. She had spent years trying to convince James that I wasn't good enough for him. One of the locksmiths gave me a sympathetic look. "Take your time," he whispered, but Margaret shot him a glare, shutting him up. I stayed calm as I walked inside. Margaret followed, making sure I didn't take anything she considered valuable. "I told James he should have made you sign a prenup," she sneered. "But at least the house is only in his name." I didn't respond. She had no idea about the legal papers James and his father had arranged before his father passed away. "You were never right for him," she continued. "A small-town teacher. James needs someone with status." I picked up a wedding photo of James and me, laughing on our special day. Margaret snatched it from my hands. "Family photos stay," she said smugly. "You're not family anymore." I just smiled to myself. The real wedding album was hidden where she'd never find it. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from James. "Morning, beautiful. Signal's bad here, but I love you. Hope Mom's keeping you company." Oh, she was keeping me company, all right. Margaret smirked. "Don't contact him. I already told him you've been bringing men over, letting the house go to ruin. He won't believe a word you say." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. James knew me too well to fall for her lies. Besides, he'd notice if I missed our weekly video call. Margaret, thinking she had won, went on. "I already called a realtor. The house is too big for one person. James can buy something more suitable when he's back, with someone better suited for him." I finished packing, taking a final look around the bedroom James and I had shared for 8 years. Margaret didn't notice me running my hand along the back of the dresser, checking that something important was still safely hidden. "I called you a taxi," she said, practically shoving me out. "Your car doesn't belong in this neighborhood." As the locksmith finished, I saw him slip some paperwork into his pocket, probably proof of who had authorized the lock change. That might be useful later. As my taxi arrived, Margaret stood by the door, talking loudly on the phone. "Yes, the house will be available for viewing next week. The previous occupant is finally gone." I put my suitcase in the taxi and turned to her with a calm smile. "Good luck with the sale, Margaret." She frowned, expecting me to cry, beg, or cause a scene. Instead, I waved and left. She had no idea I was ready for this. I had prepared for years, keeping records, hiding important documents, and planning for the day she'd try something like this. And most importantly, she had no clue about the promise James's father had made before he died. The taxi driver glanced at me. "You okay?" I smiled. "I'm fine, just handling some family business." As we drove off, I saw Margaret removing my wind chimes, trying to erase every trace of me. Let her try. She was about to learn the hard way that she hadn't won at all. I had 1 week before she put the house on the market, 1 week to turn the tables. That was more than enough time. Kate's guest room became my safe space as I put my plan into action. 3 days after Margaret locked me out, I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through a stack of documents I had saved over the years. I still can't believe she actually changed the locks, Kate said, handing me a cup of coffee. Doesn't she know that's illegal? I smiled. Margaret never worries about what's legal. She only cares about what she can get away with. And James still doesn't know. Our video call is tomorrow, I said. I wanted to have all the proof ready first. Kate picked up one of the papers and gasped. Is this what I think it is? I nodded. James's father's final gift to us. He knew exactly what Margaret was like. The day before he passed away, he called us into his study while she was at yoga. He had everything planned. I remembered that day clearly, Robert, James's father, sitting behind his desk, weak but determined. He had handed us a folder filled with legal documents, including the house deed. My wife means well, he had said, but she always tries to control James. This house should belong to you both, not be something she can use against you. We had signed the papers then and there. The house was transferred to both James and me, with a rule that it couldn't be sold without both of our signatures. Margaret had been too busy with her social events to notice. I glanced at my phone and opened an email from the locksmith. As expected, he had sent proof that Margaret had changed the locks illegally. What about the realtor? Kate asked. I called her this morning, I said. Once I showed her the house documents, she was very helpful. Margaret has a reputation, it seems. The realtor had been shocked to learn Margaret tried to sell the house without proper paperwork. She immediately pulled out of the deal but sent me copies of all her messages with Margaret first. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Sullivan. That utility guy just left. I told him everything, and he took lots of notes. I had asked Mrs. Sullivan to keep an eye on the house. Margaret needed to switch the utilities into her name, which meant the fraud department would now be involved. Kate shook her head in amazement. You thought of everything. I had 8 years to prepare, I said. Margaret's been trying to get rid of me since I married James. I learned to document everything. Then, my phone rang. It was the family lawyer who had helped with the house transfer. Alex, we have a problem. Margaret just tried to file paperwork saying James gave her power of attorney before his deployment. I smirked. Let me guess. The signature doesn't match the one on our house papers? Not even close, he said. She's getting desperate. Should I contact the DA's office? Not yet, I replied. Let's see what she tries next. After hanging up, I turned to Kate. She's panicking. Losing the realtor must have shaken her. What's next? I checked my calendar. Video call with James tomorrow at 10 a.m. Once he knows what's going on, we move to phase 2. The rest of the day, I prepared. I gathered statements from neighbors, emails from the realtor, and the fraud report from the utility company. Everything was neatly organized, ready to present. That evening, Margaret made her next move. My phone buzzed with her messages. You're making a fool of yourself. James never loved you. He was just too nice to say it. If you leave now, I won't press charges for the things you stole. I know what you're doing. It won't work. I forwarded each message to my lawyer without replying. Margaret was realizing she couldn't sell the house and was grasping at straws. Later that night, I sat on Kate's porch, looking at the stars and thinking about James. We had been through so much together. Deployments, family drama, loss. Margaret had never understood our bond. My phone buzzed with an alert from our home security system. Margaret was at the house, carrying out boxes. I pulled up the camera feed and saw she was taking photo albums and family mementos. Should we stop her? Kate asked. I shook my head. Those are just copies. The real ones are in our safety deposit box. Let her think she's erasing me. It'll make tomorrow more interesting. I watched Margaret struggle with the boxes, a flicker of pity crossing my mind. She had spent her life trying to control everything. Now she was losing it all. Tomorrow's call with James would change everything. Margaret thought she had won. She had no idea her perfect plan was about to fall apart. At exactly 1,000 hours, James's face appeared on my laptop screen. Despite the grainy video quality, I could see his concerned expression immediately. Alex, what's going on? Mom's been sending me strange messages about you abandoning the house and stealing things. I tried calling her, but she keeps making excuses. I took a deep breath. Your mother changed the locks while I was gardening. She kicked me out 4 days ago. His face darkened. She did what? Calmly, I shared my screen and began showing him the evidence. The locksmith's documentation, security camera footage, Margaret's threatening texts, and the realtor's correspondence about the attempted illegal sale. She told me you've been bringing men to the house, James said, his voice tight with anger. I knew she was lying, you'd never do that. But I never thought she'd go this far. There's more, I said, pulling up the power of attorney documents. She tried to forge your signature. James ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. I'm requesting emergency leave. This has to stop. Actually, I said, allowing myself a small smile, I have everything under control. Remember what your father did before he passed away. Understanding dawned on his face. The property transfer. Mom never knew about that, did she? No, she didn't. And right now, she's at the house removing our photos and mementos, thinking she's destroying our only copies. James shook his head. All these years, Dad knew exactly what she might do. That's why he insisted on the transfer. He loved you, I said softly. He wanted to protect us from exactly this situation. A notification popped up on my phone. The security system showing Margaret arriving at the house with more boxes. Ready to end this? I asked James. More than ready. 20 minutes later, I pulled into our driveway, Kate beside me for moral support and as a witness. Margaret's expensive SUV was parked haphazardly across the front lawn, her frustration evident even in her parking. I walked up to the front door and rang the doorbell, Kate recording everything on her phone. Margaret yanked the door open, her perfectly coiffed hair now disheveled. How dare you come back here? I'll call the police. Actually, I said, holding up my phone, James is on the line. He'd like to talk to you. Her face paled as I switched to video chat. James's face appeared, his military bearing in full effect. Mother, he said, his voice stern. Stop what you're doing and let my wife into our home. James, darling, Margaret stammered, I was just trying to protect your interests while you're away. She's not good enough for you, she never was. The house belongs to Alex and me, James cut her off. Dad made sure of that before he died. Every document you tried to forge, every lie you told, it's all documented. You have exactly 1 hour to leave before we file charges. Margaret's composure cracked completely. Your father would never go behind my back. He knew how important family legacy is. He did, I said quietly. That's exactly why he did it. I held up the original property deed, watching as Margaret's eyes widened in recognition of her late husband's signature. All her careful plans, her manipulations, her attempts to erase me, none of it mattered now. I'll expect your keys on the front step, I said firmly. All copies, and Margaret? The photos and mementos you've been removing? Those were all duplicates. We learned long ago not to leave anything irreplaceable where you could find it. An hour later, I stood in our living room, watching through the window as Margaret's SUV disappeared down the street. The house felt different somehow, lighter, as if a shadow had finally been lifted. I've arranged for military police to check on you regularly until I'm home, James said through the video chat. 3 more months, then we'll deal with everything else together. I touched the screen, wishing I could hold his hand. I miss you. I miss you too. And Alex, I'm so proud of how you handled this. Dad would be too. After ending the call, I walked through the house, restoring our photos to their rightful places. In his father's old study, I found one last surprise, a letter from Robert dated just before his death. Dear Alex, it read. If you're reading this, Margaret finally showed her true colors. I'm sorry for all the years of difficulty she caused you. But I knew you were strong enough to handle it, strong enough to protect the family James and you have built. She never understood that real family isn't about social status or control. It's about love, trust, and standing together against whatever comes. Take care of my son, and take care of yourself. You were always the daughter I wished for. I placed the letter in our family album, next to the real wedding photos and the property deed. Margaret had spent years trying to break us apart, never realizing she was only making us stronger. 3 months wasn't so long to wait. James would come home, and we would rebuild whatever Margaret had tried to destroy. But this time, there would be no more power plays, no more manipulation, no more trying to erase what we had built together. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about standing your ground and protecting what matters most.